Benny Blanco showed up at Justin's door without calling first. That is the detail that matters, not the conversation that followed. As significant as that conversation was, the fact that Benny, who plans everything, who measures every move, who has been the most calculated person in this entire story from the very beginning, showed up without warning. No text ahead, no scheduled time, no message asking if Justin was home or if it was a good moment. Just a knock on the door on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of knock that says, "I have been sitting with something and I cannot sit with it any longer." Justin opened it. Benny looked at him for a moment. The specific look of someone who has rehearsed what they are going to say, but is now standing in front of the actual person and finding that the rehearsed version feels different from the real one. He adjusted. Then he said, "We need to talk. Just us." Justin stepped back and let him in. What happened in the next 40 minutes is the conversation that nobody in this story has spoken about publicly. Not Benny, not Justin, not Haley, who was not home when it happened and did not know it was happening, not Selena, who does not know it happened at all, not yet, not at the moment of the conversation itself. But it happened, and what Justin said, the thing that left Benny Blanco, who has heard everything and reacted to nothing, standing completely still in the middle of a living room, is the thing that changed the dynamic between all four of them permanently. To understand why Benny came, you have to understand what Benny had been carrying. He had known for 2 years that Selena still had feelings for Justin. He had sat with that knowledge, carried it, protected Selena through it, and watched the entire arc. The Coachella warning, the backstage conversation, the 17-minute phone call, Haley's midnight text, the album, play out while being the person who knew the most and said the least. He had been the central node of the whole story, the one who went to Justin's door first, the one who stayed home from Coachella deliberately, the one who made the 9-minute phone call and said nothing. He had done all of that because he believed in what he and Selena had, because he trusted that the chapter with Justin was genuinely closing, because the evidence, Selena finishing the song, delivering the warning, making the call, saying what she needed to say, suggested that the unresolved thing was finally resolving. And then something happened that made Benny question that belief. He had seen something. Not a dramatic revelation, not a caught conversation or a leaked message. Something small, a moment that, on its own, meant nothing. But that, in the context of everything Benny knew, the 2 years of carrying the secret, the expression on Selena's face the night she came back from Coachella, the way she had described Justin's word "thank you" as something that had moved through her, meant something specific. He had seen the way Selena looked when Justin's name came up in a completely ordinary conversation 3 weeks after Coachella. A casual mention, someone referencing Coachella in an unrelated context, Justin's name in passing, nothing directed at Selena. But Selena had gone somewhere for a moment. A brief internal movement that she had not registered herself making. Benny had registered it. The specific expression, the one that was different from the expression she had before the album, before the song, before the closure she had said she found. It was the same expression from before. Benny had sat with that for 3 weeks. He had not told Selena what he had noticed. He had not confronted her. He had done the thing he always does. He had waited and watched and thought and assembled. And then he had driven to Justin's house on a Tuesday afternoon without calling first. Justin made coffee. They sat at the kitchen table, different kitchen, different table from the one in this story that has held so many significant conversations, but the same basic geography. 2 men across from each other with something that needed to be said between them, the kind of conversation that cannot happen over the phone, the kind that requires the other person's face. Benny said, "I need to ask you something directly and I need you to answer me directly." Justin said, "Okay." Benny said, "Is it closed? Between you and Selena. Actually closed. Not managed, not handled. Closed." Justin looked at him. He did not answer immediately. He turned his coffee cup on the table. He looked at the window. The kind of pause that is not evasion, but genuine consideration. The pause of someone who has thought about this before and is deciding how much of that thinking to give to the person across from them. He came back to Benny, and then he said something that Benny had not expected. He said, "I don't know if closed is the right word. I think the right word is transformed." Benny went completely still. Justin continued. He said that what existed between him and Selena had never been the kind of thing that closes the way a door closes, that it had been transformed. into something that was no longer romantic, no longer a source of pain, no longer unfinished, but that calling it closed implied an absence that was not accurate, that Selena had been a formative part of his life during years that had shaped who he became, that the transformation of that into something he could carry without it being a wound was the real work, not the closing of it. He said, "Closed makes it sound like she stops existing in my history. That's not what happened. What happened is I finally understand what that history was, and that understanding doesn't threaten what I have with Haley, it informs it." Benny sat with that. Justin said, "Is that what you came to ask?" Benny said, "Partly." Justin said, "What's the other part?" Benny was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I saw something in Selena 3 weeks ago, an expression, when your name came up, and I need to know, from you, directly, whether you think what she told me 2 years ago is still true, that she had never fully stopped." Justin looked at him for a long time. He said, "I think some things don't fully stop. I think they transform, the same way mine did." Benny said, "That's not an answer." Justin said, "It's the most honest answer I have." They sat there for a while after that. The coffee went cold. Neither of them moved to refill it. The afternoon light shifted in the room, that specific quality of late afternoon light that comes in low and makes everything look more serious than it is. Benny was doing the thing he does, processing without showing the processing, taking in what Justin had said and running it against everything he knew, the 2 years of carrying Selena's secret, the Coachella decision, the album, the phone call, the expression he had seen 3 weeks ago. What Justin had said was not alarming. It was not a confession of ongoing feelings. It was not a threat to anything. It was something more complicated and, in some ways, more difficult to hold than a simple confession would have been. An honest accounting of the fact that certain things do not disappear, they only change form. And that the changed form, if properly understood, does not damage anything. Benny understood that. He understood it because he had been living it himself. He had known for 2 years that Selena carried something for Justin. He had stayed. He had built something real with her anyway. He knew, better than anyone in this story, that the existence of a complicated history did not erase the validity of the present. But knowing something intellectually and sitting across from the person at the center of that history on a Tuesday afternoon are different things. He sat with Justin's words for a long time. Then he said, "Does Haley know you think about it this way?" Justin said, "Yes, we've talked about it. The journal, the Ryan conversation, the laptop. She knows." Benny said, "And she's okay." Justin said, "She understands the difference between transformation and threat." Benny looked at him for a moment. He said, "She's remarkable." Justin said, "Yeah." Benny stood up. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He said, "I came here because I needed to know if you were being honest with yourself, about what it is and what it isn't." Justin said, "And?" Benny said, "I think you are." He left. Benny drove home in silence. He did not call Selena from the car. He did not text anyone. He sat with the word transformed and turned it over in his mind for the entire drive, the way Justin had chosen it, the specific weight he had given it, the way it landed differently from closed or over or done. Transformed meant the thing was still present, still real, still part of the structure, just changed, a form that could coexist with everything that came after it without destroying anything. Benny had watched Selena live that transformation. He had been beside her through the entire arc of it. What he had not fully sat with before that Tuesday afternoon was that Justin had been living the same transformation on his side of the story. Separately, quietly, with Haley holding the context that made it possible. When he got home, Selena was there. She looked at him. She said, "Where were you?" Benny said, "Justin's." Selena went still. He said, "I needed to ask him something directly." She said, "What did you ask?" He told her everything. He told her what he had seen in her 3 weeks earlier, the expression, the internal movement she had not noticed herself making. He told her why he had gone. He told her the question he had asked and the answer Justin had given. The word transformed, the full explanation. The acknowledgement that certain things do not close, they change form, and the conversation about Haley, that she knew, that she understood the difference, that she was the one who had made the transformation possible. Selena listened to all of it without interrupting. When Benny finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He said transformed." Benny said, "Yes." Selena looked at the window. She said, "That's exactly the right word. I didn't know he had gotten there. I didn't know he had the language for it." Benny said, "Neither did I." She turned to look at him. She said, "You drove to his house because of an expression on my face." Benny said, "Yes." Selena looked at him for a long time, not with surprise. She had known for a while that Benny missed nothing, but with a specific quality of recognition. The recognition of someone who has just seen, clearly and completely, the full extent to which the person across from them has been paying attention, not just to the big things, to the small ones, to the expressions that pass across a face in an ordinary conversation before the person wearing them even notices they have made one. She said, "You've been watching me that closely this whole time." Benny said, "Yes." She said, "Even when I thought I was managing it." Benny said, "You were never managing it from me." Selena looked at him for a long moment. Something moved across her face, the specific expression of someone who has just been fully seen and does not know whether that feels like safety or exposure. Then it settled into something quieter, something that looked like relief. She said, "Thank you." Benny said, "You don't have to thank me." She said, "I know, but I wanted to." They sat together in the quiet of the evening, not with the weight of something unresolved, with the specific quiet that follows when something complicated has finally been named correctly. 4 people, 2 conversations, 1 word, transformed. There is one more detail that the person close to the situation confirmed. Haley found out about the conversation 3 days later. Not from Justin, he told her himself, the same evening he processed it enough to put into words. He sat down with her and told her Benny had come, what Benny had asked, what he had said, the word, the explanation, Benny saying she was remarkable, and what Benny had seen in Selena that had prompted the whole thing. Haley listened to all of it. When Justin finished, she said, "Benny drove to your house because of an expression on Selena's face." Justin said, "Yes." Haley was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's who he is." Justin said, "What do you mean?" She said, "He doesn't miss things. He sees everything and he acts on what he sees. He went because he needed to know the answer mattered enough to ask in person." Justin said, "Did I give him the right answer?" Haley looked at him. She said, "Transformed is the right word. For all of it. For what you have with her history. For what Selena has with yours. For what I have with all of it. For what Benny has with knowing. For everything that has moved through the 4 of us over the last 2 years and come out the other side as something different from what it was." Justin said, "You've been sitting with that word for a while." Haley said, "I've been sitting with the concept for years. I just didn't have the word until you did." He looked at her. She said, "Benny came to your house because he saw an expression on Selena's face and he needed to know the answer mattered enough to ask in person. He drove there without calling. He sat across from you and asked the hardest version of the question, and you gave him the honest answer, which was not the easy answer." Justin said, "Was it the right answer?" Haley said, "Yes, because it was true, and because transformed is what this is, for all of us." There was a long quiet in the kitchen after that. Not uncomfortable, the specific kind of quiet that settles when something has been named correctly, when the word finally catches up to the thing that has been real for a long time without having language. Justin said, "I didn't know Benny would come." Haley said, "He's been watching all of this more carefully than any of us have been watching him." Justin said, "He told me you were remarkable." Haley looked at him. She said, "He's pretty remarkable himself." That exchange, 3 days after Benny's unannounced visit, at the same kitchen table, in the same ordinary light of an evening, is the one that completes the story. 4 people. 1 word found in a living room on a Tuesday afternoon, passed from Justin to Benny to Selena to Haley over the course of 3 days, each person receiving it differently, each person finding that it fit the specific shape of what they had been carrying. For Justin, the understanding that history does not have to be erased to be resolved. That transformation is more honest than closure. For Benny, the confirmation that what he had built with Selena was not in competition with her history but existed alongside it, and that Justin understood that too. For Selena, the discovery that Justin had found the language she had already been living, that he had gotten there separately on his own, with Haley holding the context that made it possible. For Haley, the word that had been true of her entire relationship to this story from the beginning, not closed, transformed. Benny drove to Justin's house without calling. He asked the hardest version of the question. He got the honest answer. And one word traveled through all four of them and landed the same way in each of them: transformed. What do you think Benny felt when Justin said that word? Leave your theory in the comments. I will pin the most compelling one.